The major projects that we typically undertake are focused on sustaining and increasing the supply of gas. And at the moment, our daily production is largely at the sustainable level that we can meet. And when I say sustainable, I mean the sustainable level out to October 2026 when the project ends. Now, while I know the government might be looking at our PSA and what happens after the October 2026 timeline, I don't know at this stage. We have to be, as a conscientious, good partner to the government, constantly looking and anticipating increased demand and potentially increased time to be able to support the nation. So what we're doing right now in terms of significant projects is, in the last 3 years, we've spent over $70 million on installing a large-scale compression system on the Songas plant on Songo Songo Island that takes the gas that arrives at the plant and boosts its compression, its pressure, to ensure that we can process it and send it out of that plant into the pipeline to Dar es Salaam at the correct specification. Because the customers in Dar es Salaam require gas at a specific temperature and a specific pressure, primarily. And if we don't do that conditioning at the plant through compression, the gas arrives here at the wrong pressure and it can be unusable or less efficient. So we've done that. We've also worked over, which is basically rehabilitating 3 of the onshore wells. A number of them were shut in due to sand production, due to corrosion over time. Some of these wells were more than 40 years old, and they start to corrode. And so we replaced the internal mechanics of those wells to make sure that they could be brought back to production and increase the amount of production that we can actually achieve at the moment. And then one other well was starting to approach an unsafe state due to corrosion, so we replaced that as well, although it was still producing at the time that we worked that over. So that's $70 million in what is actually a relatively small project in the oil and gas industry. But to a company such as PANAFRICAN Energy and our shareholders, that is a lot of money, okay? That's us now brought up to where we are today and largely producing at our sustainable limits. But we've got to look forward, as I said. So this year, we've committed more than $20 million to acquiring 3-dimensional seismic data across approximately 200 square kilometers astride the Songo Songo field. So the Songo Songo field has revealed itself in the last couple of years to be far more complex, and the production of gas from it far more challenging than we first anticipated when we entered the project all of those years ago. We always thought the field was a single tank of gas, and it's not. We started to see different pressure declines against the anticipated pressure declines. We started to see sand production, and we started to notice that some of the dynamics between the wells, the various wells across the field, were not quite what we expected. So we ran a number of studies on this, and we identified that the field is actually a minimum of 3 compartments, possibly 4. You have the main compartment, the eastern compartment, and then what we would call the extreme northern compartment and the west compartment. The extreme northern and the west compartments are at the moment not producing. They are prospects. There is no well in them. We do not know that there is gas in those compartments. So the 3-dimensional seismic acquisition that we will undertake across all of that area, 200 square kilometers, will help us understand what we would call the plumbing between those compartments. Are they communicating with each other? Are they totally isolated? What is the potential size of those compartments? And is there an indication that there may be gas in those other compartments? Now that seismic will not tell us that there is gas in those compartments, but it will tell us that if there is, it could be in this broad area, in this sort of construct, and potentially give us an indication as to the magnitude of gas that might be there. To understand really if there is gas there, you've got to drill an exploration well. And an exploration well is about $40 million. And you might drill an exploration well in one area, and it's dry, it's a duster, there's nothing there. And you don't want to give up at that stage. You might go to another area and look again. And there's a limit to how much of that you can do, because there's a limit to the amount of capital that you've got to invest. So at the moment, in terms of major projects planned, we are going as far as the $20-something million, $21 million roughly, on the 3D seismic acquisition. Once we've appraised that we've processed that data and we've analysed it, we can then determine what steps we might do next. And that is real getting into new exploration potentially and wider field development, bringing on new high-pressure gas, new volumes, greater production, sustained production, potentially. But we anticipate a potential, and this is purely internal analysis, a potential gas shortage emerging in the next couple of years. Because at the moment, we're only producing from that sort of main area of the field and the eastern compartment. A gas field is like a bottle of Coca-Cola. Before you open it, it has a certain pressure inside it. If you shake it, it has a lot more pressure inside it temporarily. But when you open that bottle and you take some of that Coca-Cola out, the pressure declines. So every day that you take gas out of the field, the pressure in that field declines. And that changes your ability to produce. So we're only producing from those areas. We can't, at the moment, with the time that we've got available, go into those new or potentially new areas, the extreme north or the west. But we want to understand whether it's worth going in there. We do recognise that as the pressure declines, production will decline in the next couple of years. And so we're looking at it. It's not my authority, or I can't say today that we will absolutely invest in the main field going forward, but we are looking at options to try and sustain the gas production now through to October 2026 to avoid this decline that we think might emerge in the next couple of years. The way we're looking at that is another stage of compression. So the stage that we put in now will deal with gas at an inlet pressure of 80 bar declining down to 38 bar. We expect to see the 38 bar sooner than we originally anticipated because we've increased production in the last few months by about 30%. The more that you take out, the quicker the pressure declines. So we're looking now at a second stage compression system that will manage gas from 38 bar down to 10 bar, and that will sustain production for longer. Astride of that, we are looking at potentially 2 infill wells, either 1 or 2 infill wells in the main field, which are effectively new wells to suck gas from other parts of the main field where we aren't actually drawing gas at the moment, if you like. Now, all of these things are plans. The 3D seismic is a firm project that we are executing at the moment. We're just in the mobilization, utilizing a company called Africa Geological Services, who are, I think, 30% Tanzanian owned, and you'll find them here. And we'll execute that this year. We'll process it through the end of the year. We'll have a greater understanding in Q1 2023 as to what we do next. But in parallel, in the off chance that we get the opportunity, we are planning the second stage compression and we're planning the infill wells. Because if we get the green light and the authority from the government to do that, we have to go really quickly. Time is running out to get those capabilities in time to avoid what we think, and it is only what we think, might be this gas decline. Okay? And a typical project in the oil and gas industry can take 2 to something years on the sort of minor scales that we are operating at. So from conceiving where you might drill a well to that well producing gas, it's easily a 2-year timeline. Okay? It doesn't happen instantly overnight. Finding a rig that is of the right nature, design, quality, and availability and price to come in and do a program like that is extremely challenging. To find a contractor to do the design, engineering, procurement, construction of a compression project is challenging. And you've got to go through those rigid procurement procedures to make sure that it's transparent, fair, and wisely appointed. You can't take risk on shareholders' money and stakeholders' money, stakeholders being the government. You've got to get the right company in at the right time and get them to execute, and it takes time. So we are really hopeful that we can start the discussions and get the approvals from the government soon to be able to make these projects work in the right time frame. Actually has one operating asset, and that is Pan-African Energy. So all of its investments in Tanzania are through Pan-African Energy Tanzania. There is nothing outside of that at the moment. But the investments are significant. We've invested over $260 million in developing the field since we came in. And outside of that, we've invested several $1 million in corporate social responsibility projects, primarily in the education and the health sectors, primarily in Kilwa district and Lindi region, which is where we operate, of course. And of course, within that, there's quite a focus on Songo Songo Island as well. So we've constructed comprehensive medical centres with outpatient departments, maternity wards, surgeries, mortuaries, things like that, staff housing. We've constructed several of those, and we're just approaching the conclusion of a third one on Songo Songo. That's a third one in Kilwa district, being on Songo Songo. We've introduced intensive English language programs into secondary schools. We have a comprehensive scholarship program where we select the best students from Songo Songo Island, put them through secondary and university education every year. And we invest in schooling and construction of schools, classrooms, and the facilities in the districts as well. So it is quite a singular focus from Orca in terms of it focuses on Pan-African energy and the operation from Songo Songo Island to the customer downstream in Dar es Salaam. But we don't solely focus on oil and gas. We recognize we require a license to operate here in Tanzania. We have a duty in producing Tanzania's natural resources. We have a duty to ensure that the communities from which we operate benefit directly from that. And they do indirectly from some of the things that I'll talk about shortly, but directly is focusing on the health and the education. We've got to be conscientious and aware that the government has a right to choose. And so I think if you ask anybody honestly for their opinion, the Songo Songo project, conceived by the government of Tanzania, has been a phenomenal success. And Pan-African Energy, as a partner to that project, has operated as a transparent, fair, and conscientious partner. And on those grounds alone, you would expect that a license extension would be granted. But we can't rest on our laurels. We've got to keep being a good partner. We've got to keep looking forward. How do we continue to add value? We've done a great job, but we don't just get a license extension as of right. We've got to demonstrate that we're going to offer something more. Now, Tanzania is blessed with rich natural resources in abundance, you know that. And it's very easy to get perhaps swayed by that and say, well, actually, little old Songo Songo is relatively small in the bigger picture of LNG, and it is. But we are an integrated upstream, midstream, downstream gas operator, the only one of that nature in the country that has everything from the reservoir to the end customer. And so we get great insight into the needs of the market. And with LNG coming in, with other gas producers coming in, not a problem. We're used to developing markets. We've developed a phenomenal industrial market in Dar es Salaam already. We don't see gas on gas as a threat. We don't see other producers as a threat. But what we do see is enduring value in the Songo Songo field. We've produced about 500 BCF, billion cubic feet of gas, in the last 18 years. And there's roughly the same amount potentially recoverable remaining, but at lower pressures, so it's more complex, as I've said. If we're not selling gas to the customers that we're selling now, if we're not selling gas to power, with the hydro dam coming on, we know we have the ability, proven, to develop markets in wider Tanzania, not just in the Dar es Salaam region, but in Morogoro, in Dodoma, in Tanga, in Bagamoyo, and more remotely than that. And if we got the permission, the authority, to develop beyond Tanzanian borders as well. I've just come out of a meeting this morning, a briefing, talking about investment in the energy sector to unlock economic value in Africa. There are those landlocked countries that aren't blessed in the way that Tanzania is with natural resources. We can get gas to them through different methodologies if we're given the time and if we're given the authority to do so. And so I'm not scared about our future, but we have to be cautious in our planning. We have to be aware that we have to continue to add value, and we can't just think, we've done a good job, thank you very much, give us another 10 years. And that is what we're trying to do by looking at these other parts of the field. Spending $20 million that potentially will have no value to Pan-African Energy whatsoever. If the contract ends in 4 years' time, there's no value to it for us. There's huge value to the government that's left holding that data, but we're aware of that. But if we wait until the end of the license to do this work, it's too late. So we're taking that risk now to make sure that we're ready to go if and when the government says that we can go. Recently, in the last, I think, 24 months, maybe slightly less than that, I think the first member of the Songo population progressed through secondary school, through university, and graduated. I think it was Songo's first fully acknowledged graduate. And I believe that individual is now working for Coca-Cola Kwanza. So they don't need to come back to the oil and gas industry. Actually, we don't even insist that they go to university and study, you know, a hydrocarbon-related subject. What we want is to give people opportunity. And if they see opportunity in marketing, in finance, in the leisure sphere, or whatever it might be, fabulous. As long as you're committed to your studies and you come out and you are able to return value to yourself and to your community at some stage, that's fine. What we want to do is give opportunity. We don't want to constrain people in any way. We work entirely within the local content regulations here in Tanzania, so, and we always have put Tanzanian companies and Tanzanian people first. So if there is a capable service provider, capable supplier, or a capable employee that can come in, and even if the full capability is not there, but can come in and support us in any of our projects and learn from what we do, whilst adding value, you know, we need them to add value, we will always go to a Tanzanian organization or an individual first. But we don't have specific partnerships with companies. I think the industry, in terms of the nature of operations that you undertake, can be slightly, what's the word I'm looking for? Sinusoidal. So there'll be peaks of activity and then troughs of activity. You know, you do your work, you have an effect from that work, and then you need to do something again in 2 or 3 years' time. So to have a solid, enduring partnership with a company, I think would be a false economy, to be quite honest. But absolutely, we look for Tanzanian partners through our project periods, Tanzanian service providers on an enduring basis in our pure sort of operations and maintenance side of things, but they are not necessarily formalized relationships. Problem per se in hindering growth. At the moment, as I mentioned it from the outset, we are largely at our sustainable limit of gas supply based on the development that we've undertaken to date. So every customer that you add now increases the rate at which the field starts to decline and exacerbates the potential crisis or problem that might occur in the next couple of years. That said, there are lots and lots of customers looking for gas from us. There is a physical challenge around that, which is we have a downstream ring main. So the gas comes in at high pressure into Dar es Salaam and then is depressurized and goes into a ring main, a circuit of pipelines that feeds those 50 industries. If you're an industry some distance from that pipeline, connecting you can be quite challenging. Clearly, there's a cost to it. There's the existing infrastructure that you have to move around or through. And then there is a pressure decline through that pipeline. As the gas enters it, at one pressure, the pressure declines towards the far end of that, and it might be at an unusable level when it reaches the customer. So distance from the ring main is a challenge. Now, that can be overcome, but it starts to get a little bit more complex and a bit more expensive. So, for example, an industry that might be in Kibaha, as an example, some distance outside of Dar es Salaam, you get gas through virtual pipelines. So you compress the gas in Dar es Salaam, you put it on the back of a truck in containers, you drive the truck, they have a decompression capability there and a storage capability. You take the contents of the compressed gas, put it into their facility, and then you keep that cycle going. So the virtual pipeline is really a fancy name of saying it's trucks moving gas, or barges, boats, trains, whatever it might be, moving gas to remote customers. So we can add customers, and we have a number of customers that we're talking to looking for gas. But we also have to be, again, I'm going to use the word conscientious, gas supplier to our existing customers. So if you're a customer of ours today, and we then choose to sell 500,000 cubic feet of gas to another customer tomorrow, you've just invested $1 million to be able to receive our gas. And then I say to you, hey, look, we've just sold more gas to this guy, so in 3 years' time, we can no longer supply you because the gas has declined. And obviously, with the limitations we've got on our license at the moment, the sustainability piece of that is increasingly challenging. So we've got to be loyal to our customers that exist now and to the government who depend on us for power supply. So the continued adding of customers at this moment in time is a challenge for us. If we can reach a position with the government where we can invest further, we are ready to invest further to sustain this gas supply, and at that moment you can then start adding more customers. And the potential is significant, as I've said, not just in Dar es Salaam, but far, far further beyond. We've got a great team, a downstream team in Pan-African Energy, led by a young engineer called Saba Sowiso, who has done a phenomenal amount of research on the potential markets out there. And they are reachable, and it is economically viable. It's the challenge of the amount of gas that we can honestly say we can supply at the moment that is preventing that going ahead. There is potentially zero value in this work for Pan-African Energy. Huge amounts of value for the government because they might be left with all of that data when we leave in October 2026. But what it does do for us, as I've said throughout, we've got to be ready to go. If we get the authority, we've got to be ready to go quickly. And so the value to us is it gives us the information that allows us. Oil and gas exploration is risky. It's really risky. People sometimes don't realize when you're drilling a gas well, there might be less than half, less than 50% chance that there's any gas at the bottom of that well. You might get your subsurface analysis wrong. It just might be a dry reservoir or no reservoir there whatsoever. The 3D seismic reduces that risk. If without it, you could drill a gas well and miss that reservoir by a meter, by 1,000 meters. With it, the probability, if there is gas there, of you drilling it in the right spot is increased significantly. So by doing the work now, it gives us a huge amount of information that we can use to be ready to go if and when we get the authority to go. And when I say go, I mean drill new wells, because that's what this business is about. More wells, more gas. Oil and gas industry is really kicking off now, not just in Tanzania, but across the world. And I said it's sinusoidal at times, and it went through a slump, and very little was happening. So there were drilling rigs available, there were service companies available, and you could almost depend on them coming in the right time frame. Now all of those guys are working busily across the rest of the world. So it's quite possible that we might not be able to find a rig that can come in and drill. But if we did, hypothetically today, as a general rule of thumb, if you said go today, it takes 2 years roughly to get that gas producing from a well. You've got contract negotiations, you've got to select where you're going to drill, you've got to design the well, you've got vast amounts of very technical, what we call long lead items, the completion for the well, the wellhead, the Christmas tree, the tubing, all of that sort of stuff. You've got to procure it, negotiate its procurement, transport it, and then you've got to install it, of course. So roughly, as a general rule of thumb, 2 years. Now, sometimes you can be lucky and you can get it done in an accelerated way, but I would personally never plan in that way, because I think if you start promising very short timelines, you're going to let somebody down, and we don't want to do that. I'm extremely proud of this, and yet it has really very little to do with me. It has everything to do with the 107 guys that work with me in Pan-African Energy, that do a phenomenal job marketing, ensuring the gas reaches people at the right specification. And if you do the job well and you do it efficiently, you can make the gas affordable, and that is critical to industrial expansion. But I like to tell this story because I do think people don't see Pan-African Energy. They look around them and they don't see the benefits of gas. And yet, as I think Abby said at the beginning, every single day that you live your life in Tanzania, or at least in an urban area such as Dar es Salaam, you're probably being affected in several ways by the gas that Pan-African Energy produces. So as a start, the lighting that we're enjoying in this building, the air conditioning, it's powered from somewhere. Now, it might not be our gas, but our gas is powering something else that allows this to be powered. 45% of all electricity, on average, produced today in Tanzania comes from Songo gas. The gas is used to produce bottles for soda, for beer. It's used to produce cigarettes with Tanzania Cigarette Company. All of the bad things in life our gas seems to produce, okay? It produces ceramics, the plates that you might eat your lunch off. If you go to the Serena Hotel, your food is being cooked with Pan-African Energy gas, or Songo gas, because it's Tanzanian gas. I shouldn't say Pan-African Energy. Coca-Cola, wrong, Pepsi. The lids that hold the soda in those bottles, Pan-African Energy, Songo gas. The roofing, potentially on your house or in the restaurant that you're eating in, Alaf, Pan-African Energy, Songo gas. Every single day, it touches you and it touches Tanzanian lives. And the 50 or so industries that we support and sustain employ, on average, our estimate is about 29,000 local people. That's a phenomenal amount of direct employees. You then have secondary industries that crop up around those industries, whether it's a shop, whether it's somebody providing water to that industry, drinking water, cleaning within that industry, whatever it might be. There's secondary and there's tertiary employment effect. Now, I agree that those industries would probably still be here today if Pan-African Energy wasn't providing that gas. But the product would be a lot more expensive because they'd be using far more expensive fuel. They may not have expanded at the rate that they're doing. The employment might not be so high. But I tell you now, the impact on the environment will be colossal compared to what is happening now. And I think we're all seeing around the world at the moment a real impact from environmental change. I've just returned from the UK where it was 40 degrees. We don't have air conditioning en masse in the UK, and I was suffering. And I've spent 8 years in Tanzania, so I'm slightly acclimatized, but it was bad, and it is visible, and it's changing. So everything we can do to reduce those greenhouse emissions, and gas is a transition fuel that is available and rightly available to Africa now, we should be promoting it. And I think Pan-African Energy and people like Busy at the back of the room there should be extremely proud of the contribution it makes in all aspects.